Hey guys, I'm Sophia Angelique. I am an artist. I mostly focus on digital art, and I mostly focus on art content. I'm trying out a different kind of video style this time, kind of where I go over my speed paints that I've pre-recorded, and I just kind of talk with you guys, kind of what's on my mind or what I want to share with the community. And, I'd love to hear your thoughts if you like the kind of content, if you like this video. It was partially inspired by Cat and Chat, who I've been watching like religiously these last couple of weeks because I just discovered her. She is so amazing. I love her content, and she's so articulate. Like I aspire to be that articulate, especially as somebody who also has ADHD. But yeah, so check out her videos if you haven't seen them yet. I mean, she's covers mostly like news content on her YouTube channel, and that's kind of what inspired me to like start using the webcam, talking with you guys, but also centering my content still around art, which is why I'm going over my speed paint. So hope you enjoy the video. Let me know if you want to see more of these kinds of videos, and I'll definitely try my best to record everything. My art, that is, because sometimes, you start an art process and you just don't want to even worry about recording, but this time I recorded everything from start to finish because it was for an art contest. And you just never know, which is kind of what this video is about. So I entered a art contest in the Overwatch community, and it was centered around Wooyoung, one of their newest characters that they've recently added to the game. He's a support, and it's October, so it's Halloween themed. I was kind of debating what to do here. I had initially thought of a vampire, and then one of my best friends was like, bloodbender, and I was like, oh my god, wait, that's such an amazing idea, because he I don't know if any of you guys know anything about Overwatch or Wooyoung, but he wields water, like with his staff and the weapon he has. So, vampire, blood instead of water, it just like made sense. So that's what I started doing, gathering my references and inspiration for what I wanted his outfit to look like. So I kind of went for this sort of like not really Victorian, kind of like Victorian with a mix of like that classic vampire refined look with the, puffed sleeves, the vest. I switched the position of his body facing our right instead of our left. Sometimes I really have to remember my left and rights, which is not good, but I digress. Because his weapon, or I guess I don't really know what it is, like armor, a lot of the characters have this around his hand where the water comes out, is on his left hand. So I wanted to make sure that I, got that accurate. Not to say there's anything wrong with, switching the position of somebody's weapon in your own fan art, but I just wanted to make it as accurate to the original character as possible, especially since I was changing his whole outfit. I didn't want to go with his canon outfit or his original outfit in the game because it wasn't giving vampire to me. I mean, he's not a vampire. But anyway, as you can tell, I'm going to be a yapper in these videos because that's kind of the point. All of my videos won't probably be like this because sometimes you just don't feel like talking, but I just figured I'd give it a shot. So if you're here, you are here to listen to me yap. If you don't like that, I am so sorry. This video is not going to be for you. Anyway, as I was working on this, you could see me kind of starting to block in the background. As I mentioned before, I've been watching a lot of Kat's videos, and she mostly focuses on news content in her YouTube. On her other socials, she does like streaming advice and stuff, and just like content advice in general. But I've been watching a ton of her like news videos on like artists being exposed for like various things. A lot of it tends to be using AI, and these will be either new artists or artists that have been on the platform and in the community for a very long time. And nobody ever wants to hear about that. Somebody that they look up to, or a new artist claiming to try to find their way into the community only to find out that they are just abusing AI to get there. Nobody likes that. And those people, they just continue to taint the community itself because, let's face it, AI is always going to be here. No one, especially an artist myself, likes to admit that, but it's going to be here for a while. Our job as artists is to continue to fight against that, because this is our livelihood, especially if you're trying to make it in the business, make it a form of content that you share with others, it's our livelihood. So we need to work on protecting it. And when these, so-called invaders, which they pretty much are, try to abuse that by faking their way through the process, it sucks, If you hear giant trucks and loud engines passing by, that's because that always happens on my road. It's the worst, but anyway. A lot of these, videos where she kind of goes over, the newest drama or controversy behind an artist using AI, it can spark a lot of debate, but also open a lot of people's eyes to just how common this is now. And I don't want to, hammer in the nail and keep talking about the same thing over and over again, because we all know how, this looks in the art community at the moment. But what I wanted to kind of talk about is something that I haven't really, I've seen it talked about, and Kat has talked about this herself in some of her videos, but a lot of the time AI content in the art community focuses on just how wrong AI is, which it is, and not only what it's doing in the art community and the fact that it is stripping away the life and soul that goes into human-made art, but as we all know, it's also very bad for the environment. But with all that aside, that is what a lot of the content is about, just the effect that it's having on the world itself, the form of creation, the act of creation, the soul and passion behind that, and how much that is needed in our society. But another kind of topic branching off of that I've found myself thinking about a lot recently, because I've personally experienced it, and I know a lot of artists have, is how the invasion of AI affects real artists' processes and what that looks like. And it actually takes a much bigger toll, at least it hasn't for me, than one might expect or one would anticipate. So as this has happened to me a few times with my most recent pieces, but as I've been watching a lot of Kat's videos where she, talks about a recent artist who has been exposed for AI, a lot of the time in those Twitter threads or Google Docs or videos, people will analyze why this person is being accused of using AI. Whether it's falsely accused or correctly accused, they are using AI. So they will analyze the art that is related to the accusation, the art that they feel looks like AI. And everything will be scrutinized and nitpicked, rightfully so, because AI is a huge accusation. If you are claiming somebody is using AI, you need proof to back that up, or rather evidence to back that up. Because if you just go around saying this is AI, and this is AI, this artist is fake, and you have nothing to back that up, your claim has very little validity, and, it kind of just sounds like you're being an ass. But that's why it's important to comb through and say, okay, why does it look like this person is using AI? Why are we accusing them? So that's why a lot of these pieces will be nitpicked. And while that's a good thing, on the other hand, it can cause a lot of real artists to, as well, start deeply overanalyzing their art. So I'm a perfectionist. I always have been. And that's not necessarily a good thing. That's a topic for another video, but perfectionism can often lead to lack of productivity, lack of motivation, and, put a damper on someone's, confidence, right? It can lead to insecurity. And that's kind of tied into this whole thing. I don't know if any of you watching have, I'm sure some of you have seen my, my latest pieces. I've recently developed this style over the last couple of years that relies heavily on texture, and that can come in many forms: brushes, extra strokes, that paintery style where it relies heavily on texture. And sometimes that can lead to sketchier looking lines. Certain parts of the work won't look as refined because you rely on, this is important in semi-realism styles especially, you heavily rely on trying to get your point across. If you can get your point across with not as little detail as possible, but without completely rendering every single thing, then that's what you want to aim for. That's not to say that rendering everything perfectly is not a good thing, but it's important to sometimes find that balance, because if you can tell your story with the perfect amount of detail, then you told your story. That's that. and the overall image, the overall picture that you are expressing is expressed. So that's why sometimes you might zoom into a semi-realistic piece that relies on texture, and you will see that not everything is as refined. There may be some very sketchy lines or some blobs, because when you zoom out, those blobs articulately tell a story. And that's the point, those blobs are placed with purpose and to tell that story. And a lot of times with AI, you'll zoom in, those blobs are trying to tell a story, but they're not doing it very well. Here's a good example. This is my personal favorite artist ever, NVP1. He is incredible. I mean, just look at some of these pieces. But if you zoom in here, you'll notice that, these buildings in the back are, some of them are made with like blobs or textured lines, and then you zoom out and you're like, oh my god, that's a building, and you're like, how did he do that? I ask myself that all the time. That's something that I'm trying to continuously work on and improve on. But with the rampant AI kind of trampling all over the art industry, sometimes someone may zoom into those niche details, or lack thereof in this case, and a question mark might raise above their head, and they may go, oh, that doesn't look right. Why would somebody of this rendering skill end up using blobs to try to articulate a message or a shape? And that's sometimes what I've seen in these AI arguments. A lot of the times that is a valid point to make, because usually somebody with a very high rendering style, there would be a lot more purpose and attention to detail in their work. But attention to detail is not necessarily subjective, but it is relative. Attention to detail varies from style to style. Somebody with a very clean looking anime style, for example, stray lines that just kind of, or blobs that just appear, may not be something that conveys the right message in their art, because they rely on very clean lines, very clean rendering. Everything is shaped very, very smoothly, right? But somebody with a more semi-realistic style, I mean, look at this castle, for example. Right now, I'm adding, those more detailed shapes. But even with those detailed shapes, if you zoom in really far, it's gonna look a little wobbly, because the point is, when you zoom out, it looks like a castle with shape, with towers, individual towers, and depth. And that is the goal with telling that story. And same with those trees in the back. Not all of those branches are refined. Not all of those trees have texture, but the brush that I'm using and the shape language that I'm using conveys, okay, those are trees. And that is that balance is important. So with the rise of AI and the questions that are raised, those questions caused by AI users, it has started to, and let me know if anybody else has experienced this that has, more of a semi-realistic style, or you don't even have to have a semi-realistic style. You can have a very, very, anime style, and maybe you do still rely on texture and kind of straight lines or blobs to tell a story. And I'm sure people who have that kind of style experience this too. It's like you're looking at something that you're doing, and you begin to ask yourself, if somebody else were to look like this, would they think it looks like AI? And that is such an unhealthy mindset, but it is a mindset that has affected so many artists these days, including myself, because AI scrutiny is so huge right now and important. You don't want to allow an imposter to come into the community and succeed with something that is falsified, something that is relying on, a robot to create what that person needs, that they feel that they need to succeed. But on the other hand, it's beginning to unhealthily affect artists in a way that makes them deeply overanalyze their style. And for me, I guess I'll speak on my experience. As I was working on this piece, which kind of inspired me to talk about this, there were so many times as I was rendering, like with these arm clothing folds. You'll probably see throughout the speed paint, I redid them a few times because, well, one, I just wasn't happy with every time, that before I redid it, I ended up not being happy with how it looked. But there were a few times where it crossed my mind, do these folds look like they could have been made by AI? And an artist doesn't want to think that during their process. Unfortunately, in this day and age, it's kind of inevitable because of how much AI is shoved in our faces. And the last thing an artist who puts a lot of time and work and effort into their craft wants is for somebody to accuse them of using AI. It's such a big fear of mine just because of how popular it is now and how often artists are accused of using AI, falsely or correctly. The sun is coming through my window right now over here, so if everything just got brighter or has been brighter, that's why. Yeah. Anyway, what was I talking about? My speed paint was about to end because I set it to a speed that was a little bit too fast for this video. I ended up yapping a lot more than I thought I would. So I slightly decreased the speed so you guys can get a little bit better of an idea of my rendering process without it being like so fast and zoomy all the time, because I zoom a lot during my rendering process, if you can't tell. But yeah, so that effect can take a toll on the artist's brain, especially if you're a perfectionist like me and you are trying to break out of that cycle of my art needs to look perfect. Now, at this point in time, with AI being everywhere, that perfectionist mindset begins to shift and you start to overanalyze, you start to look at your work through a different lens, and that lens can be an unhealthy one because you begin thinking to yourself, does this look like AI? Does it look like, AI made these folds or made these trees in the back? Okay, let me look at why this person was accused. This person's clothing looks this way. Does my clothing look that way? At the end of the day, AI was trained on artists with so many different styles, because now AI can just replicate anything, pretty much, unfortunately, which is why, people are so suspicious these days. And that suspicion is both a blessing and a curse. It has helped the art community. It has also negatively affected the art community. None of that is at the faults of these people who are suspicious, because that suspicion is what is at least trying to keep the art community safe from these AI users. The fault is completely on those who are using these AI tools to generate their art pieces. How can you not expect these other artists in the community or people who love art to, constantly wonder if these artists that are coming into the community or use techniques or shape language that begins to look suspicious to be suspicious? How can you not expect them to be? When it's everywhere these days, and these huge, even famous artists that have been in the platform for years have begun to use AI and have been called out for it. But with somebody, like myself, who always overanalyzes, it begins to take a toll on your process, a process that is originally meant to be, authentic and natural, right? And comes with mistakes and flaws, but those mistakes and flaws should be looked at through a lens of how can I improve, and not through a lens of does it look like a robot made this? And someone could argue, well, that lens of how can I improve can tie into the AI argument, but improvement for the sake of improvement, of oneself feeling like they want to strive to be better, is healthier than improvement for the sake of appearing like a real human being. Do you know what I mean? And it's sad that these days artists have to worry that if they appear like a real human being. And as I was, working on this and thinking of the judges of this art contest and other contestants, I have, part of this could be at the fault of the fact that I have been just constantly watching cats' videos. I think they're addicting almost. So that whole idea of artists being exposed for AI has just been bouncing around in my head for the last week. And that could be partially why I'm so paranoid. But I was thinking to myself, what if I, submitted this to the art contest and there was something that I forgot in the piece, which has happened to me so often. I mean, I just did a piece recently of this raven drawing. She had 2 left hands at first, or 2 right hands, I can't even remember. And people on TikTok called it out. I was mortified. And that is the first time anything like that had ever happened, because I used this reference for my hands and I didn't realize that in the reference it was the same hand making 2 different positions and not like a set of hands. Do you know what I mean? With the whole saying like I thought it was like a right and left hand doing it together. No, it wasn't. Anyway, lesson learned, right? Luckily, I didn't have too many people on TikTok claiming that it was AI because of it. Thank God. I mean, I'm honestly kind of surprised I didn't get more people claiming it was AI just because of the state of the art community now these days and how big AI is. But since then, I have learned, okay, pay attention to not only your references, but your own hands, right? But with that being said, I've made a lot of, mistakes in my past works, and I'll look at them and I'll be like, oh, dang, I really did that, but it's okay because I'm getting better with each piece that I make. But now mistakes can be detrimental to the way that you're perceived by the rest of the art community in the world, because that mistake can lead to others being suspicious of your authenticity and doubting your authenticity as an artist. And that's scary because your authenticity as an artist is so important, at least to me it is. And when that is doubted or scrutinized, that can be painful. And you see it these days with false accusations, which happen because of these suspicions. You'll see an artist that has been in the platform for a long time, or even a new artist that just happens to, that time they decided they wanted to join the art community and share their art with the world. They're falsely accused because of maybe some very apparent tangent lines or some things that don't really make sense. They have more to learn, or even an artist that has been working for 20 years. There are a few tangent lines, or there's just something that looks kind of wonky, because humans aren't perfect. And that is something that people need to remember. That's what's so important in this rise of AI now, is we are at the point where AI is both perfect and imperfect, because it's trying to present itself as something that's human, but in doing so, it creates imperfections because it can't be human. But on the other hand, something that is human-made can have imperfections. So where the line draws and where it starts to breach into AI territory, where those imperfections add up and it starts to not make sense, that's when it is up for interpretation. That's when that scrutiny comes in. That's when those analyzing moments come in. And if there's no proof, it's for the community to decide. But when you scrutinize a human's artwork that put a lot of time and effort into their craft, you're gonna notice imperfections. And that's why it's hard sometimes to prove whether or not an artist is using AI when it's not clear. And when those imperfections start to become reasons to doubt an artist's authenticity, it takes a toll on the artist, because that artist begins to think, if I have imperfections in my work, then there's a chance I could be painted in a light that I don't belong in. And as I was working on this piece, I redid the trees so many times because I zoomed out and I was like, ooh, I feel like I could see an AI replicating those trees. Let me see what I can do to make it look more human-made. Or as I was working on the sleeve, I was like, what are some examples of AI-made sleeves? How do they appear? Let me stay away from that. Even if without AI in the picture, I could have created those sleeves on my own, which I did, right? I created those sleeves on my own, but then AI being in the picture is what caused me to doubt myself and view those imperfections, potential imperfections, in a much more negative light than they need to be viewed in. And it happened a lot during this piece. The hands, I was so bothered by the hand holding the staff at the bottom of the drawing because of the angle where it was cropped. Only 3 fingers were visible. I was like, oh my god, if I render those 3 fingers, because I'm gonna take this bottle as an example, right? If you're holding a bottle, right, there's 3 fingers here, and then this finger is down, it's really uncomfortable to hold all 4 fingers like this. Normally, if you're holding something that has a bit of a girth to it, you're going to, hold it kind of like this in a much more comfortable position. I mean, I'm not gonna stand up and show you guys how it looks when it's down at your side, but it's the same way, right? It's a much more comfortable position for your hand. But if the picture is cropped here, you only see 3 fingers. And what is a common mistake in a lot of AI generated images? 3 fingers, or I guess an incorrect amount of fingers, 4 fingers, 6 fingers. 10 fingers. I don't know if anything's been that extreme. Actually, it has. I know it has. Toward the kind of beginning of when AI started to, make a rise. Oh, I've seen the worst images ever. Anyway, now I was like, can I somehow extend the picture so that all, 5 fingers were visible? As you can see, I'm starting to render them now. And you see, I added a 4th finger. And I was like, okay, now people can see there's all 5. But as I zoomed out, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. 4 fingers around something like that when you're holding it down, that's uncomfortable. So what I ended up doing was bringing his fingers down, because I noticed it was a little anatomically incorrect anyway, having the fingers that high on the pole. So if I bring them down and only show 2 visible fingers, somebody might think, okay, an AI is normally not going to give a character 3 fingers because they're more, I guess, advanced nowadays than that. So this was an artist's choice to only show 3 fingers. 2 fingers and a thumb, right? Because you can kind of see the base of his thumb in this. Now, what I could have done was extend the bottom of the drawing so that all of the fingers were visible. But I was like, that's going to throw off the whole composition, because for the whole hand to be shown, that's a lot of extra room at the bottom. And I crafted this composition particularly with intent, and where it stopped and where it ended was purposeful. And my composition was created with intent, and I didn't want to have to drastically change it just so I wouldn't fit in a box, that box being something suspected of being AI or something being AI. I didn't want to fit in that box, but no artist should have to worry about fitting in this box that was crafted by a robot, something that is not authentic. And why should artists have to fear being put in that box? You know what I mean? All that to say, I don't necessarily have the right solution to this problem. One could, at the end of the day, say, it doesn't matter if your art has imperfections that could be suspected of being AI. It's human made, and it is, and people who believe in your authenticity know that it is. So why should you have to worry about it? Stay true to yourself, this is your art. And yes, that is true. I believe that, and I would love to believe that I could continue to work in the same way I've always worked, where I just go with the flow, and I try not to overanalyze, which I am so guilty of always doing, and I accept the imperfections sometimes. I could do that and just hope that I don't end up in a suspected AI video, right? But as somebody who can be an insecure person and overthink a lot, I can't imagine being put in a scenario where I am falsely accused. So of course I'm going to overanalyze everything and wonder if my work that I'm putting out could be mistaken for AI. Because if you fear something, you're going to try very hard to avoid it, normally. Some people are freaks. But I know I'm not the only artist that deals with this problem. In fact, I've spoken to my other artist friends who deal with the same fears, They're like, I'm so scared my art's going to be suspected of being AI. It's so sad that we've come to that, you know what I mean? But it can potentially, if I were to be optimistic, and try not to dwell so much on the negative aspects of this situation and this point that I'm trying to make, can it be potentially helpful? Yeah, sure. If it allows you to take a step back and wonder how you can view your art in a more positive lens that will be healthier for your sanity, then sure. If that is what it's going to do, could end up helping you in the long run, helping you improve. But I don't want to harp on the same fact. I just feel that desire to improve should come naturally and not out of fear. But that is the world that we live in now. And at the end of the day, we got to keep fighting the fight and do our best to just stay true to ourselves, not give in to that fear, not give in to AI and the effect that it's having on the world right now and the art community itself. And if there's ever a time where I myself or any other artist that is truly human is falsely accused, then that is the time to just stand up to who you are. And it's important to remember to record speed paints, to, if you are someone like me that merges at the end, merges all of your layers at the end, you know, record your layers. If somebody asks for proof, it's a common thing for AI users to not want to show proof or not be able to show proof because they can't, or their proof is like a stretch or a fake AI speed paint or they're tracing or whatever. So make sure you can provide proof, and that's really all you can do at the end of the day. And be authentic, just be you. That's kind of one of the reasons why I'm beginning to record these kinds of formatted videos where I just kind of talk with you guys with my face cam on, because authenticity is valued in the art community, especially right now. Having a personality, a face to place, to connect an artist to in a world that's full of robots and AI trying to fake authenticity is valued. So I know I value it. I mean, that's why I've been obsessed with Kat's videos lately. I mean, I'm always watching streams and YouTube videos and everything while I work, because I just like watching people and admiring, you know, how they present themselves to the world as creators. And that's something that I'm working on. So enough yapping. I feel like I've kind of made my point. I'll head over to the end of the speed paint so you guys can kind of see my final details that I add. I'll kind of go over a bit of why I am doing what I'm doing. I believe... Okay, here's where I start adding my signature. As you can see, I redid it quite a few times. And at the end of each of my pieces, I add a grain effect using the camera raw filter. Or actually, no. At the end of my pieces, I started recently adding a Gaussian blur. I'm probably saying that so wrong. That adds kind of like a slight blurry finished effect on my work that I really like. And then I'm going into the camera raw filter and kind of slightly tweaking the values with contrast. Not too much, because I don't want to lose that initial you know, look that I'm trying to convey, but I might add a vignette around the whole piece to kind of center around the focal point more, and then I will add a grain over everything because I like the texture that it gives. I used to add a rock texture over everything. I stopped doing that because I felt like it was a little bit too much. Not that if you do that, that it doesn't look good. I just kind of wanted to start taking my art in a slightly different direction. So I've only been adding noise or grain over everything. And then here, after I did that, I'm starting a new layer because once again, I noticed the trees and I was like, I don't really like how that looks. It's okay to not like how something looks without having to loop it in with AI. It's just sometimes now, especially, that can go hand in hand. If these are imperfections that should be kind of worked on anyway without AI in the picture, then that's great that, you know, now I am very focused on it in a way where I think to myself, you know, how can this look better? How can this look more human-made? That can be a good thing, kind of going back into that more optimistic reasoning behind AI having this effect on artists' mental states. But ultimately, at the end of the day, art is a beautiful thing that humans need, and no matter the fear that is brought upon real artists with AI on the rise, never stop making art. If you do, I will find you. If you feel you are meant in your heart to be an artist, please never give up on that because you are scared of AI taking over. At the end of the day, I believe that AI will have its time here and it's going to be around for a while, but ultimately humans will still always seek out human-made things, human creation. These AI bros out there may feel differently, but eventually they will be silenced, okay? Anyway, I appreciate everyone for watching and listening to me yap. I'm not the best at articulating my words. God, I just proved my point. I hope that is something that I will improve on as I continue to make videos like these. I tend to talk really fast and like stumble if I'm not careful, so the speed of which I talk may vary because I might catch myself talking too fast and like really try to reel myself in so that I can articulate my words a lot better. But yeah, like I said, hopefully that improves with more videos like these. I didn't make like any sort of notes for this. I'm just kind of like raw dogging it. Just me trying to talk about what's in my head without, like, I kind of pre-planned in my head, but that is a recipe for disaster. Anyway, thank you for watching. I appreciate it, and let me know your thoughts on all of this, you know, just kind of how my point makes you feel, if you've experienced the same, if there's an entirely different topic regarding AI that is not really talked about in the art space right now. Let me know. But once again, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. You can follow me on TikTok and Instagram. I also have a Twitter, but I like never post. I post like every 3 to 6 months, and like the art progression is insane, but hopefully eventually I'll get myself together. I also have a Twitch, and I'm still kind of figuring out how I want to go live on there and like how I want that to look. I'm kind of still working on my face cam situation because my ports on my computer are like broken, and not a lot of the time I can't use my Wacom tablet and my face cam at the same time. It's a mess. Anyway, I'll get that figured out eventually, but yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.